Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast, and welcome to you, Jim Daly. Thank you for making time for us today.
Simon, it's so good to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Jim is the president of Focus on the Family, and I think you've been. Is it about 30 years or something?
Yeah, just over 33 years, something like that. I think I started when I was 28, so you all can do the math.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was reading a little bit about your background before I got back in touch in January. So, as I understand it, your father left when you were 5, and then you lost your mum to cancer when you were 9. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and she had just married the year before, so our stepdad, the day of my mom's funeral, actually, we got home and he walked out of the back bedroom and said, I can't take the stress, I'm leaving. So he walked out literally the day of my mom's funeral. So that was all really tough. We didn't, Hank, our stepdad, we didn't have a great relationship with him. So that didn't really cut too deeply that he took off, but that put me into foster care.
Foster care, yeah. And were you ever actually adopted yourself, or did you just stay in the foster care system and then and age out?
No, I was there for a year and then my bio dad reappeared. He struggled with alcoholism, and so I lived with him for a year. And then my closest in age sibling, she turned 18 and I was turning 12. So everybody thought I should probably not live with them. And I ended up living with my then 20-year-old brother. So that was, junior high and high school, which really age 11 to 18. I lived with my brother, and that had its own drama.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. So thriving adoptees. Well, no, let me just before I say that. So that eventually you then came into work in this area professionally, right? So what did that path look like, Jim?
Yeah, it was interesting. Going through high school, living with my brother had its challenges. It gave me a lot of freedom. I had literally no boundaries. So I remember saying to him on a Friday night, "What time you want me home tonight?" He'd say 2, 3 in the morning should work. So, I was like, wow, I'll try to stay out that late. That's,
Yeah,
but I think when I graduated, I just had something in me that I needed to keep going. Probably a good dose of fear that I didn't know what the safety net was for me. I literally didn't have anywhere to go during my university years, and for breaks like Christmas or Easter or what have you, when the school would shut down. I mean, my siblings and I weren't that well connected, so. I think when I got back from Japan, I studied in Japan and had a great opportunity my last year of university. And so coming back, I got into a Fortune 500 company. I was working there for probably 5 or 6 years. And then I got a call from a friend who was working at Focus on the Family and said, "I think there's a position that you need to consider." And I was like, "No, I really don't want to do that." But, for me as a Christian, I believe God ordered those steps and I ended up saying yes. And yeah, so I've been here 33 years. And I think, Simon, it comes down to that saying here in the US that we have, that sometimes our passion is born out of our pain. And I think that's true for me. I mean, I really wanted to help children not suffer from the breakdown of the family.
yeah, yeah. So it's so true, isn't it? The passion born out of the pain.
Mm,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's, and a lot of people, women who go through abortion or have other life-changing circumstances that can often become their life's work because of that. And I think that's how God works, frankly. I mean, we go through these experiences, and I think He allows us to go through these valleys, and then, like the Scripture says, nothing goes to waste. And I think certainly my experience is He gave me a great passion for children who are suffering, and that's where I want to spend all of my time and effort.
yeah, yeah. I heard this expressed by a mentor of mine about 18 months ago, and she says, "Our mess becomes our message."
Mm, yeah, that's good. I like that as well. That's really
Yeah,
good. It's so important, it's just really important. I was in the paper industry working for International Paper. It was a big company, but something just hit me. And it's a worthy vocation. If you're working for Coca-Cola selling colored water, that's okay. But it's, yeah, what kind of lives do you touch day to day, and how do you go about doing your job? And for me, I just found a great deal of fulfillment doing what I do, keeping marriages together, helping children be in a healthy environment, etc. So it's something to wake up to every day.
Yeah, good on you. So this phrase, then, the name of the podcast, Thriving Adoptees, what does that mean to you? What comes to your mind when you hear the phrase Thriving Adoptees, Jim?
Well, it's a tough environment, especially the foster environment. Jean and I have such a wonderful wife, and she said, when I got home after asking on national radio, "Hey, people need to consider getting involved with foster care and be a foster parent, etc." I remember getting home the very day it aired because she heard it on the radio. And she said, "Hey, if you're going to ask other people to do that, we should probably do it." And I was like, "Hey, no way. I was already a foster kid. I paid my dues. We don't have to be foster parents." And she just gave me that eye, like a good spouse will do. Like, you got to be kidding me. And so we went through the process. We got qualified, home studies, and everything you have to do, at least here in the US. Not sure what it is for you in England. But, we had to do that. We probably had 15 kids go through our home. We had two kids, sibling set, a girl who was 4 and a boy who was 2, that lived with us for 18 months, then a break, and then the mother died of a heroin overdose, and the kids came back to us, and they were with us another 18 months. So I could say right now, experientially being involved, what does it mean to thrive? Seeing these kids, they're now 11 and 9. They're doing well. Their dad has been through rehab. He's established. We certainly helped them with those things too. And it's not to our credit. We just got involved and did what we could do to help this struggling family. And, they really are thriving now, and it's wonderful to see. So it's not formulaic. These children all have their own free wills. It's a tough road for a lot of them because of the emotional abuse and trauma that they've experienced. But what a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you talked about road. One of the things that hit me doing my background research was this phrase that you used in your autobiography, and it says, I'm living proof that no matter how torn up the road has already been, or how pothole infested it may look ahead, nothing is impossible for God. So I loved that. I loved that, and the bit that I loved about it was, obviously it's a very strong metaphor, but it was also about looking. It was about looking back. It's the past, and it's also about the future. And not many people will look at both of those options. They'll just say, well, it's about the past, or they're just the future. You're looking the forward. So what does that mean? What does that mean to you in terms of the road to thriving, if you like?
Yeah, for me, I totally agree with that. People can lock in on their past, become bitter and angry. And that's one of the more difficult questions I receive after speaking. I'll have, 20 people that want to mention something to me. Typically men who did not have a good relationship with their fathers. And they'll say, "How did you not become bitter? How did you not become angry?" I'm still angry. And it's such a difficult question because for me, it's just experiencing the grace of God. I always had the ability, even as a child, to kind of not own my dad's shortcomings. And for some people, they feel guilty. They feel like I was the problem. I just never had that sense about it. He made his own choices. I knew that at a young age. My mom made her choices. I knew that. And I was going to be afforded the opportunity to make my choices. And somehow I just understood that. So I never had that guilt feeling. I never was bitter. They blew it. They didn't hold it together. I understood that. And I was going to be given my own chance at some point to be a husband, hopefully, and be a father. So I do appreciate that observation that you're making, that you have to learn from your past, not own somebody else's bad decisions, like your own mother and your own father. But also, as you move ahead, how do you apply that in your own life and be a better person and be a better husband, a better father, if you're given that opportunity? And so that really has been the goal. And certainly in this area of helping other children who are struggling, my goodness, I mean, to encourage, to give you some scope, Simon. This is what kind of frosts me a little bit, angers me a little bit. You look here in the United States, we have about 400,000 kids in the foster program. About a quarter of those, 100,000, parental rights have been terminated. And in that context, that means one child every third church. We have about 360,000 churches in the U.S. Can one church out of every three adopt one child? And I just think in that regard, I mean, for us to put ourselves forward, to bite the bullet, to do the tough thing, it's not easy. These kids come very broken. But man, can just one family in 500, 1,000 step up and say, I'm going to do the job, and then others support them? That's the feeling of it. So I kind of covered a lot of territory there. But I mean, that to me, yeah, we as Christians particularly, we need to allow the Lord to heal our past and then give us a bold vision for what can be done in the future.
Um, yeah. I mean, the first thing that popped, a few things popped into mind. Have you come across backyard orphans? Have you come across that?
I haven't. It sounds familiar, but what do they
Yeah, yeah.
do?
Oh, well, they're following the same mission as
Oh,
yourself,
great.
with
Yeah.
involving, helping churches spread the message. So these 100,000 kids, where the rights have been terminated, find homes. Eric came on the podcast. He's a great guy and an inspirational guy. You mentioned the word inspirational. So I can make a connection there if you'd love that. If you like that
Oh,
stuff.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah,
I'd
he's a
love to
great
do
guy.
that. Simon, very, very specifically to the question though, when you're looking at healthy children, all the data, all the social science that we see in the US supports the idea that children do best in a loving home where there's a mother and a father. And I think, unfortunately, we don't do enough as a culture to recognize that. We often have policies that work against the building up of the intact biological mom and dad family. And I just wish in that regard we'd be more aggressive in pursuing the science, even if you just want to call it the science rather than the spiritual dimension. The two are very closely linked, in my opinion. But with these children that come in foster care, and I felt this. I did well in sports. I played American football. I was pretty good at it. And in that regard, that gave me a level of confidence. But I could tell you, even being out there playing and leading a team, which the role I played was quarterback, so that, you had to get in the huddle, call the play, get going. I still felt a lack of confidence to a degree about how good I could be or what I was contributing. And I think when you look at these kids that come out of foster care, they have such deficits in the area of self-confidence and empathy, self-control, maybe even integrity, because they modeled what was modeled for them was horrific lack of integrity from their father. I think every male I encountered, adult male in my life, whether it was my father, my stepfather, my foster father, and then my brother to a degree, really could not tell the truth. And I saw that over and over again. It was one of the things that I think made me a better person, but I had to realize, okay, what is happening in their lives that keeps them from being good men? And so when you look at the way forward, that question about the way forward, I think in part it's learning from the mistakes of yourself and those around you and applying it to your own life to do better in all those areas I just mentioned.
Yeah. My wife's uncle died recently, and his father was alcoholic.
Mm,
His father was an alcoholic, and I remember him sharing. We were close. We were close. My wife was very close to him. She actually donated a kidney to him a couple of years ago.
mm, Wow.
So she was really upset at losing her uncle, and especially so as he didn't get a full chance to enjoy the kidney,
Right.
that, but so yes, his father was an alcoholic, and I remember him saying, telling me that on the day that his son was born, so some 40 odd years ago now, that he had a moment. He realized that he didn't want to be the kind of father that his dad had been. He wanted something different. So a lot of things, they turn on and I guess as a person of faith, you would call it like an epiphany moment. It's those epiphanies that change our world when we see something different, and we can't really bottle that epiphany and give it to
Mm.
anybody else.
No, it's
Um,
true. And I think I refer to it almost like a spiritual pendulum. There is something when I talk to people like me, people that grew up in difficult childhoods, etc., there is a fairly significant number that actually make that self-correction. Because of what was demonstrated to them, what they lived in, the environment they had, some come out with a certain resiliency, a certain conviction about what they want their life to be about. And I think that's such an incredible benefit. And I think it's a God-given benefit, actually. I think that is a spiritual pendulum that does keep kind of culture and society moving in a reasonably good direction, right? If we just kept going further and further down, I think humanity would have ended long ago. But there's this, what I think of as a spiritual principle that allows us to better what we had, to live differently than what our parents did, etc. And that's a great attribute if you can get there. And then when you look at foster care, Simon, here in the US, when particularly when boys age out of the system, 60% of them often will end up in jail or in prison. And I mean, that's a horrific statistic. And I think that's one of the unfortunate byproducts of being looked over and over every year of your adolescent life, that you don't matter, you don't care, people don't care about you, the system doesn't care about you. Sometimes you live in horrific circumstances where abusive foster situations exist. I pray those are minimal, but they exist. And, it's just such a sad outcome. And that you think of in the US, at least, we talk a lot about how to reduce the prison time and the number of people going into prison. Think of that. If we could in foster care, by hopefully giving these children a sense of worth, a sense of uniqueness, being made in the image of God, etc. What if we could reduce that conviction rate from 60% of outgoing foster kids, foster males particularly, down to say 10%? Wouldn't that be a great achievement, just by hopefully connecting them to healthy adults that can help them do better?
yeah. So true. Like you think, well, this is systemic change
Mm,
that's required, and going right back to the start of the problem rather
yeah.
than, like we hear a lot about the war on drugs, don't we, and all this stuff. But if because you grew up in Compton, yeah.
Yeah, I spent some time in Compton, which is when in 71 and 2, when I lived there, it was the murder capital of the United States. It was a rough neighborhood.
Yeah. And like we hear, when I think about Compton, I don't know if there's been a lot of rappers from Compton. I don't know. I'm not a rap fan, but somehow I've
Yeah,
heard
there's
of
a
a
lot of
movie.
rappers out of Compton.
Yeah, straight out of Compton. It's a gang center. So, if we and that breeds more, doesn't it? Like the situation gets worse, and the drug stuff gets worse, and then that's where that's where the jail population comes from, a lot from that gang center. So, you talked about um, a sense of worth. So, how do we develop our children's sense of worth? What is
Yeah,
it?
it's a great question. I think it's a fundamental parenting question. And you know, for Christian parents particularly, I've got two boys, 21 and 19, and you know, it started very young when I talked to them about what it meant to be human. How are we different from the rest of creation? The fact that we're made in the image of God gives us inestimable worth. And that, you know, then talking through the applications in culture when we get to the issue of abortion. You know, for us, it's the value of every human life. And speaking that into your children is so critically important for them to know who they are and what their worth is and what may motivate them to accomplish great things in this life that God has given them. I think those are all aspirational, beautiful concepts that start when boys and girls are very small and their parents encouraging them. And unfortunately, Simon, as we're talking today about, you know, foster care and broken families, how do those kids pick up those pieces and find those ways to identify who they are, what their meaning is, what their purpose is? Big questions. And unfortunately, when you're in the gutter so often, you just find yourself in this death spiral, like we were just talking about. You're a throwaway individual. People don't necessarily care about you. And I think that's where in culture we could stand together. Certainly the Christian church needs to be able to communicate that and to do all we can do to help women, to help children. And you know, that again is what I feel my calling has been in life, is to step up and try to speak for those people that don't have a voice. And you know, that's what we're doing every day.
Yeah. So interesting things here. I love that metaphor that you had about the spiritual pendulum. You've talked about the role of God here. You've talked about Lord, Lord, heal our past. I'm just wondering, the world of adoption seems to be very concerned about the psychological rather than the spiritual. So the psychologists and their trauma kind of obsession seems to be the strongest narrative. Where I'm not a religious guy, but I'm a spiritual guy. I'm very interested in that stuff. And my take on it is that this spiritual side, whether it's non-religious, like my take on it, or it's religious, as your take on it, that is actually far more powerful. I mean, to pardon the phrase, it trumps the spiritual trumps the psychological, but we seem to be obsessed with the psychological. Well,
Yeah,
we seem to be. That's kind of my take on it. And
no, it's a great observation. I think, you know, unfortunately, over the last 50 years or so, at least in the United States, and I'm not as well acquainted, although I've been many times to the UK and London. I love London. What a great city. But I think, you know, all of us in Western democracies have experienced this, where over the last 50, 60 years or so, we really have moved away from the spiritual dimension. And I appreciate the way you phrase that. Yeah, we don't want to be religious people. We want to be, at least in the Christian faith, people that are following Christ and hopefully exhibiting all those attributes of who Jesus was. So we're not criticized for being bad people. There are certainly bad apples, but you know, generally we want to be doing good things to represent God well. But in that regard, I think the healing of the spiritual dimension is, as you said, it's the core of who we are. I have met many people who were formerly alcoholics who were able to change in a day, because something happened to them spiritually. And bang, I mean, they just lost their appetite, their addiction to alcohol in that context. I've met drug addicts that are similar. And then there's other types of people that takes time to heal those things, and others who never heal. So when you look at those examples and those testimonies, I would say those that are having that dramatic experience, what they're getting right is that spiritual experience. They understand who they are, what they're about, that they're made for a purpose, that they're made in the image of God, that there's something bigger that they're identifying themselves with. That is beautiful, because that is what keeps you from poor decision making, hopefully makes you pursue those things that are righteous and not going to harm you. You know, there's a scripture in the Bible. When I first became a Christian at 15, it's John 10:10. And, you know, it's kind of odd. I didn't know anything about the Bible. We were what we call CEO Christians. My family, we went to church Christmas, Easter only.
Oh, right. Okay.
CEO Christians.
I love that.
And our neighbors would take us on those 2 days, and we'd dress up and do all that. But the point I wanted to make is that when you really tie that together, when you have your identity in Christ as a Christian, and you are faithfully, not always perfect, not always making the right decisions, but generally as a compass moving in the right direction, those blessings will come. In John 10:10, it says, the thief, meaning the thief of our soul, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I remember when I was 15 and somebody wrote that in my first Bible, and I went looking for it and found it. The whole of the debate, the battle spiritually, rests on that scripture, in my opinion, that the thief of our soul, the enemy of our soul, Satan, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And he does it in a variety of ways. And then it says, but I have come, Jesus, I have come that you may have life, and life more abundantly. And I can only say, when you look at most of the data on people who are faithfully engaged in a spiritual pursuit, to your point, they have more rewarding everything, more rewarding marriages, more rewarding sex life. Their children do really well, typically, if they're not hypocrites, etc. So I think all the indices point to that very scripture, that when you're living a life faithfully to the Lord, not perfectly, but faithfully, his blessings come. And when you're not, they don't.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, that feels like a really great place to end, Jim.
I'll tell you what, as an orphan kid, I wouldn't do it any other way. And I would just want to encourage everybody, you know, who's listening to, you know, just take an assessment of where your life is at. And I know that may be a bit bold in a British context, but my goodness, life is short. And if I could do that as a 60-year-old man now who grew up in all the stuff I grew up in, I just want you to have the best life you can have. And it starts with that, in my opinion, that self-assessment. Where am I at? Where would God want me to be? And how do I get there?
Yeah, powerful stuff. Thanks a lot, Jim. And we will speak to you soon, very soon, listeners. If you, as always, check out the show notes and see what Jim and his team are doing. I mean, prolific, their podcast. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's huge, and the support they're bringing to parents, to families is superb. So check out the show notes, see what they're doing on social, check out their podcasts, and we will speak to you again very soon.